47-year-old man went to the doctor just the other day. The doctor asked him, he said, how you been getting along? He said, well, he said, pretty good. He said, with all this COVID stuff, he said, I've really been washing my hands a lot. And the doctor said, well, that's a good thing. He said, you do that. And he said, yeah. He said, just the other day, he said, I found answers to the 8th grade math quiz. So, James 3, verse 13, who's wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in meekness. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. This wisdom's not descended from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. Where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there. But the wisdom this when you know stuff. When the wisdom is from above, it's first pure, then peaceful, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. Now the fruits of righteousness is shown in peace by those who make peace. We spent time last week really talking about the tongue, but James begins by talking about, my brethren, be not many teachers. And in many ways, James continuing that thought here in verse 13, by talking to the teachers, by talking to individuals that you might even say are not just proclaimers of the truth, but individuals that are leaders of the church. And really what he gets down to, you want to boil it all down to one word that really just summarizes what James is trying to tell these people, is to watch your pride. There's a difference between wisdom of the world and wisdom of God. We see that. We study it. We understand it. Philosophy, the love of wisdom, the study of wisdom. Philosophy, phileo, and Sophia is the actual love of, and Sophia is wisdom, love of wisdom. Philosophy is good. We can learn from the wisdom of men that have gone through the years. One of the great, the book of Ecclesiastes is inspired, but yet it is a book that deals with a man that is in search for happiness, and he searches through a lot of things. And in his search for happiness, he comes to a conclusion that all that really matters is to hear God and follow His commandments. Listen to God. Uses the word fear. The idea of fear is you respect Him enough to follow His will, so you listen to what He has to say. And so, there's a man of wisdom, a man that you might say, in many ways, was a philosopher. He was philosophical in his approach. His wisdom is seen in the book of Proverbs. Now, Proverbs is interesting. When you think about all the sayings, I wonder how many of them, I always have, I've wondered how many of them came from Solomon himself. Now, I'm not saying that just a few are inspired. The whole book's inspired. Don't go away thinking that I don't appreciate and follow and trust in the book of Proverbs to do. But if you think about, folks came to hear Solomon and to see Solomon from all over the world. Well, when you go see people, you usually carry stuff with you, right? Not just what's in your pockets, but what's in your head. And if he talked to these people, and I'm not saying he did, because kings, as a general rule, weren't approachable. But if he talked to any of these people, or if they just left him with something, some of those sayings that they had could become his. And the truth's there. When man, though, begins to take his philosophies and his ideas and elevate them to a point in which he does not understand where he got them or where they came from, he needs to stop and think. He needs to look at where he is and where he got all this from. Where did I get that? Where did that come from? And that's true of all of us. I don't care at what age level we are. We are all a product of everything that we've come in contact with. And so consequently, everything that we've come in contact with that we like, we hold in, and the things we don't like, we put away. And so, being a product of what we've been around, that's why we often tell folks, be careful who you're around. Be careful what you listen to. Be careful what you watch. Be careful what you read. Be careful what you study. Be careful who you listen to. Well, James reminds us, let's dissect all of this. Don't be lifted up with pride and think what you know, what you have, is right. Who's wise, he says. Who's wise and understanding among you? Wise men of biblical times were considered those that shared information. And so, once again, as we said, he's talking to the teachers. Who's wise? The sharer of information. The teachers, and there were public teachers in biblical times. Who's wise and understanding among you? He says, let him show it by good conduct, that his works are done in meekness of wisdom. There needs to be a consistency in life and in message. And we tell that to preachers, and we tell that us old preachers, tell that to young preachers and college professors that are training preachers and schools of preaching that are training guys to be preachers. That's the thing. You can't preach one thing and live another. Now, there are some that try it, and they ultimately fail. James is saying that here. You can't preach one thing and live another. Life has to be consistent. But this is true of every Christian, isn't it? Don't come in the church building and sing how you love Jesus and then talk about him by using his name in vain outside. Doesn't work. And we could apply that to any different things. But the idea, James says, is let him show by good conduct. The word conduct is the idea of a good life. That his works are done in meekness. Meekness. Anybody know what meekness is? Meekness of wisdom. Strength under control. That's exactly what it means. To carry the imagery of the word itself, in biblical times, it was the idea of what we would think of the taming of a horse. The idea or the ability to put a bit in a horse's mouth and to tame him so that you could control his strength. Kind of the history of the word itself. Strength under control. The idea of taming of a horse. And so he says, let his good life be done under control. Control of wisdom, he says. Well, what kind of wisdom? Well, he begins by talking about wisdom that is from the world. Worldly wisdom. Wisdom that comes not from God, but comes from man. Well, what about this wisdom? He says it's bitter. If any of you have bitter envy, bitterness, some say. Bitter envy, though, is the idea of prickly, sharp, prickly, earthly wisdom. Then it's the idea of jealousy. Jealousy. Are you jealous? Are you jealous of other folks? Now, apply this. Let's apply it in two ways. Let's apply it to the teacher. Let's then apply it just generally. Teachers, are you envious of the other person's class or the other person's ability or the other person's followers? Can't do that. That's wisdom that's from the earth. What about us? We can't be jealous of others. You know, I'm glad for you when you buy a new car. You can have that coupon book too, you know. Buy a new house. Proud for you. Glad when you get a new suit of clothes. Just remember, don't thump the collection plate as you pass by. Put something in the box so that I can get one. You know. But the truth is James is reminding us that evidently there were some that they had a sharp interest in self and not really in others, not really in who and what they were teaching. But he says not only bitter envy, but he also said self-seeking in your hearts. Self-seeking. They're only out for themselves. And then he says, do not boast and lie against the truth. Boast, brag. Don't boast about things. Don't brag about things. It's always interesting to get around a bunch of preachers. Why? Because some of them couldn't tell the truth if their life depended upon it. You know, well, I went fishing the other day. Well, good. What'd you catch? I caught one this big. You did, yeah. And as they keep talking, you know, they keep going like this until you finally get to the truth, and you just want to reach up there and slap their hands together and say, "That's how big it was, right? Yeah, it's a minute." Nah, it's preachers. Yeah, preachers. You know. How many did you have Sunday? Well, I think I didn't look at the board. I think we had about 400. You couldn't tell if your life depended on it. You know, you can't count. But there were teachers that were boasting. Now, he does not qualify here their boasting. Were they boasting about the number of followers? Were they boasting about what they knew? We don't know. There's really no way of knowing. But the general principle, the general idea of just don't boast. Don't be a bragger. Oh, we did this and it went so well. I always like to, for preachers, honest, you know, somebody will say, well, we did this and it went so well, and somebody said, well, we did it, and it fell on its face. And then I've witnessed what, you know, some say, oh, it just went so well, and you think, no, I know what happened. But James reminds us as individuals, don't boast. Be confident in what you have. Be confident in Christ. Be confident in your faith. Don't boast. Then there were those that he says evidently were lying against the truth. You know, there are folks that lie. There are folks that twist the truth. There are folks that take this Bible and they twist it to meet their own. There are religious leaders that know that they teach error and will not change. I can think of one many years ago that made the statement. He knew a different way from what he preached, but he would not change his preaching because he was afraid of losing his following. Now, I never would have had a personal audience with that man, but if I ever had, my own sake, I would ask him, so then what are you after? A number, a following, or helping these folks get to heaven? That's a question that, as preachers, we all have to ask ourselves and wonder. James says, earthly, what lies about the truth, twists the truth, changes it for their own good. And this is true of others. This is true of individuals. You know, you can point folks to things, and you can show them and teach them. Admittedly, they have to believe it. They have to follow. You can't do it for them. I can't do it for them. They have to do it for themselves. But while they have to accept that fact, and they have to follow their life. We have to make it all fit together. We can't twist it. We can't change it. We can't pervert it. We can't lie about it or lie with it. And so James reminds us that that wisdom that has those characteristics, that's earthly, he says, it's not descended from above. This is verse 15. But it is of the earth, from the earth. In other words, really you could say it's from man. And not only is it of the earth or from the earth, he says it's sensual. It appeals to the flesh. In other words, it's not appealing to truth. It's appealing to one's own appetites, the flesh. And then he goes on to say that it's demonic. We sometimes, in our own minds, we separate Satan, demons, and Satan, demonism. And yes, I understand why we do that, and that's demons, Satan. But James is saying this earthly wisdom is demonic. It is of Satan. And so, no part of it. Don't listen to it. Because he says, look what he says, here's the results. For where envy and self-seeking exist. Now, he's pretty well covered those things already. Envy and self-seeking, where folks have been eaten up with their own pride. He says, look what happens. He says, confusion and every evil thing are there. Confusion. You ever been a part of something that was confusion? Not just that you were confused, but it was just a matter of confusion. Sure. Yeah. Tennessee legislature. Yeah, that'd be a good one. I thought of the DMV is what I thought of. I had to go yesterday and wait for an hour and 15 minutes to get a car emissions test. I really love giving $9 to tell them I can drive my car. But anyway, that's, but he says here, the word confusion, it means disorder or instability. It's not stable. He says where this pride exists, where this earthly wisdom exists, he says there's disorder, there's instability, and he says every evil thing are there. The idea there is every vile, or here was some other ways of looking at that Greek word, cheap, gaudy, valueless. He says these things come out because wisdom that is of the earth. Bad results. Bad results. So here's the contrast, verse 17. We're going to talk about wisdom that's from above. But before we do, is there anything anybody like to say? Or add? We would love to have it. Okay. So, beginning in verse 17, but wisdom that is from above, godly wisdom. Wisdom that is from above is first pure. Unmixed is the thought of the word, the Greek word. It's unmixed. It's not mixed with anything. You ever hate to say this, I hate to even think about this, but you ever gone to the jelly jar and maybe you realize that when you stick your knife in to get some more jelly out that you left some breadcrumbs the last time you had the jelly out and they're in the jar with the jelly? You ever had that happen to you? Maybe I'm the only one, but it's happened. And then all of a sudden, especially if you hadn't had jelly for a while, sometimes it kind of molds on you, right? Because it's gotten some impurities in it. I think of a story. When I think of this, I think of a story about a man that went to one of these markets or one of these outdoor markets where people come like set up for the weekend, flea market type settings, and he had apple butter and he had something else And when he came to one weekend to where he was going to sell, instead of having 2 ladles, he only had one. And so he used the same ladle out of both. And before he realized that he had a mixture, in both of them, both of his products. Well, that's what happens. Well, James says wisdom that's from above, though, is not mixed. It's pure. It's peaceable. Boy, don't we like peace? It gets along. It's even. It's gentle. Gentle, of course, is the idea of just that. It's gentle. It's easygoing. Doesn't get pushed. Doesn't get ruffled. It's gentle. Willing to yield. Can I change your mind? If we sat for a while, could I change your mind? Could I change your mind on some biblical subjects? Yeah, really does depend on what it is. I didn't specify. I think about one time going to a man's house, and because of the situation, and he and I were friends, but because of the situation that evening, he didn't like what I believed about something. And so that evening, I only got to the front door. He came out on the porch. We talked. We had good talk. And sadly, I walked away without changing his mind, even though I gave him scriptures, and even though he's heard those scriptures all of his life. He's still a good guy. He's still a member of the church, faithful. But he's got a thought about something that I don't think's right. And of course, he looked at me and he says, "So you're not right." But in order to change his mind. They have too. You've sat with people and you've talked with them about the Bible. You just hadn't sat at their house and talked to them around the kitchen table, but maybe you've talked to them in passing. You've talked to them when you worked, or just over the fence, so to speak, with a neighbor. I had an elder once. He said, "You can't teach me anything." I don't know. I didn't know how to take that then. I still don't now. I can't ask him, unfortunately, because he's not on this side of eternity. I think I know what he meant, but I also think that what he meant was he had great arrogance about the fact that he knew it all, and he couldn't be taught anything. James says that wisdom that's from above, it's willing to be taught. It's willing to yield to reason and to righteousness. He says wisdom that's from above is full of mercy. Oh, we love that idea. We've talked about mercy a lot lately. The idea of giving us what we don't deserve. That goodness that comes from God. That love that comes from God. He says wisdom that's from above is merciful. Hangs in there with people. It has good fruits. In other words, it does good things. It does good things. In talking to some of my folks from Humphreys County after the flood, they were overwhelmed with the amount of goods that they got from folks, different places. Of course, we sent some things, and that's wonderful. Folks went and helped and things of that nature. Those are good fruits. Those are good things. James says wisdom that's from above is full of good fruits. It's without partiality. Without partiality. You don't favor one over the other. And that's hard, isn't it? It's hard. It's hard not to have favorites. I usually, if I know of have more than one child and I know they're playing favorites, I usually talk to them. That was one thing that my mother did not believe in. She did not believe. No, we have it. That's good. This is, I didn't even check. My mother believed that we were treated, my sister and I were treated equally. The only thing I got more of than Carol got is I got more spankings than Carol got. I got a lot more spankings than Carol got. I talked to Mom about that before she died, and she said, well, I said, I got it. But my mother, we got a lot of things at Christmas. We didn't get a lot of things a year, but we got a lot of things at Christmas. My mother would make sure that Carol and I, we never sat and counted and never sat and figured how much, money-wise Carol got as opposed to what I got. But I remember Mother talking about, I need to get you one more thing to make it even. I need to get Carol one more thing to make it even. She made sure that there was no leaning to and fro, without partiality. Joseph, as we'll eventually get to on Sunday mornings, his trouble came. Why? Because his brothers were what? They were jealous of him, right? And part of that jealousy came about because why? Daddy was partial to him. And so we need to be without partiality. Now let's apply that to dealing with people. We have our friends, right? We all do. We all do. We have the folks that we feel the closest to, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it's due to the fact that we have things in common. Some of it's because we just we're close to the same age, or we have the same background, or education, whatever's about the same, or our likes and our dislikes are very familiar, very similar, excuse me. And so consequently, we enjoy one another's company. But we should like everybody without partiality. Everybody treated the same way. Everybody, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, without partiality and without hypocrisy. You've heard before, hypocrisy, hypokrites is the Greek word, is the idea of an actor. In biblical times, actors, one individual might play several roles in a production. What they did, though, is mask. They would hold their mask up. And they could play different people. They were the hypocrites of their day. The hypocrites are those that look one way and do another. Say one thing and do another. They are different in appearance to what they really are. Now, James says, wisdom that is from above doesn't have that. Doesn't play roles. Doesn't play favorites. And it doesn't play roles. Now, the fruits of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. And so he says, the results of wisdom that is from above, it's sown in peace. And it produces peace. If you sow in peace, then you produce in peace, right? So, here's a lot, at least to me, maybe not to you, but to me, a logical conclusion. When we have trouble with people, and when we have trouble as groups, our problem may be that somebody of us doesn't have the right wisdom. I'm not saying who. Somebody of us doesn't have the right wisdom. So what does that mean? Well, we need to check ourselves to make sure it's not us. And I'm not saying it is us. It could be, the other fellow. But it's always good to check yourself. It's always good to make sure that it's not you, that it is somebody else. And so James reminds individuals here, keep your pride in check. To me, that's what this paragraph is all about. Keep your pride in check. Keep yourself in check. You might say, well, as a teacher, yes, but for all Christians. Now, we ask ourselves, how do we gain the wisdom that counts? How do we gain the wisdom that is from above? Let me give you 3 points. First of all, go to the right source. Go to God and go to His Bible. How are we going to have the right wisdom? It's right here. It's right here. We need to spend time daily with this Bible. Now, I'm not a person that I've never been a preacher that said, okay, you need to read 9 chapters a day. If you'll read 9 chapters a day, you can have the New Testament read in 30 days. You can read the New Testament through every month. I'm not an individual that says that. Now, if you want to do that, that's fine. If you want to read, I believe it's 2 chapters a day and 3 on Saturday and Sunday, you'll have the whole Bible read by the end of the month, end of the year. Excuse me. Yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine. That's fine. I think I've always thought quality over quantity. That's what I've always believed in. But I still, whatever we do, whether it's 5 or 10 minutes or X number of chapters or whatever it is, spend time with God and spend time with His Word. Secondly, how are we going to gain this wisdom that's from above? By developing the right qualities of life. By developing the right qualities of life. Well, how do we go about doing that? Well, we get back to the Word of God. We throw out, as we said a while ago, we throw out what's bad, we keep what's good. But I think maybe the best answer is that we think more of others than we do of self. Wisdom that was from above versus wisdom of the earth. Didn't a lot of it have to do with how we treat others? How we live our life with regards to others? And so if we want that wisdom that's from above, we have to take the right qualities in, but we have to think of others more than we think of self. That's not easy. We have to aim for the right results. What are the right results? To live a life that's right with God and for God. I don't know what our results will be, but I want the Lord to say of me, you help folks get to heaven. That's what I want Him to say. And I think if He says that, then I can say, okay, I had the right aim. And so our aim in life is really just to do that, to help folks get to heaven. And you might say, well, how does that help me? Well, if you help folks get to heaven, you'll pretty much be setting the right path yourself. And so that's wisdom then that's from above. Anything else that anybody would like to say or add? Yes. That's right. Who gives to all men liberally and upbraids not. That's exactly right. Yeah, isn't it interesting? I've thought about a little bit of that with regards to how many times in all the books they say something over here and then they come back to it over here. And I think I know why that is, but it's quite interesting. So, yes, yeah. That's how when I went into Greek 1 as a freshman at Freed Hardeman, our teacher said, "Okay, boys, I'm going to teach you how to learn Greek. You're going to learn today how to learn Greek. And number one, he said, repetition. Number two, and we're all writing this down, repetition. Number three, repetition. And so that was the three ways we learned Greek. We had a test every day. And we had the class 4 days a week. So, yes. Anything else? Well, James 4, we're going to talk about fighting. We're going to talk about warring, if you will. And we'll talk about that, but that covers kind of the first 6 verses. We will probably at least go through verse 10 next week. We may cover more than that. We may not. James 4 is kind of hard to divide, but it's kind of hard to let things pass without saying too much about them. So just read the whole chapter, be ready, and if I don't cover it, then you got your head on your homework for the week. Anything else? Well, let's bow for a word of prayer. Our most kind and gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for the many blessings. We thank you for loving us and watching over us. We thank you for your word, for the fact that it is a lamp to our feet, a light into our path. It gives us the direction for which we are to live our lives. And we're thankful for it. But in as much as we're thankful for it, help us to ever live by it, to ever live with it, to ever let it be seen in our life and in our words and in our teaching to others. We ask that you be with those that were announced earlier that are sick or those that are fixing to go through procedures. We ask that you watch over them, that you bless them. We have several that are still home, not feeling well, but improving. We ask that you continue to be with them, that they'll continue to get better as well. We ask that you watch over us, that you bless us and keep us. May we ever hold to you as you hold to us, for this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great, great week. We thank y'all.